Auburn Community Television and this episode of Meet the Artist. Meet the Artist is supported by the North Auburn Artists to introduce artists in our local community. I'm Lucinda Laughlin, and today our local artist guest is Jennifer Johnson. Jennifer does fabulous metal sculptures, and I am sure you have driven past her home on Bell Road and seen some of the incredible pieces that she has in her front yard. And she has brought just a few examples of those today. So let's talk to Jennifer and find out about how she does this, and she can tell us about her beautiful work. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you.
So you have an interesting background in that you were very fortunate because you had family that were artists as well.
Yes, definitely.
So tell me about your family members and how that influenced you.
Sure. My grandmother was an art teacher for the school system. And so every time I spent time with her, we were always doing art projects. My great-grandfather was also an artist. He was a painter. And although he never showed in a gallery, he had brilliant work. It's beautiful.
And it's just wonderful that you had those for inspiration and also just to nurture that in you.
Yes, it was wonderful.
I had kind of the opposite experience. There were no artists in my family, and they thought that there's no way you could ever make any money in it, and therefore you should be discouraged from it. So I always love when I meet someone that has had that opportunity and just that nurturing of the artist in you. And I think then that leads us to the next part of your story, which I absolutely love. And tell me about then how you ended up going into the metal work.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have always been an artist. I've done so many different types of work. But on one particular night, I had a dream, and I was watching myself out of a 2-story window, and I was welding a sculpture of a woman who was praying. And I talked to my father and said, how do I do this? And he introduced me to Sierra College, and I took a creative design and metal class, learned how to weld, and I was showing in a gallery within 6 months.
And that is just absolute. So that was definitely inside of you and just needed that little tweak, and off you went.
I was probably the first female that was in those classes at Sierra, and the only one creating artwork. Everyone laughed at me, but it was a lot of fun.
So in a creative design and metalworking, there weren't people there that also wanted to do sculpting and metalwork?
There were, but a lot of functional pieces.
Oh, okay.
And I took a class just before that. That was a technical class, and they were all pipe fitters and welders.
Which I would think that the welding would be such a significant point of learning that, yeah, I could understand doing that as a first step.
Yes, technique is really important.
I tell you, the welding aspect scares the life out of me. Anytime open flames,
It takes a little bit of time to get used to all the sparks flying at you, but
Oh.
I used to love to play with candles at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner.
Oh, I think that we could have an endless discussion about that.
Probably.
So then you have gone from taking the classes, and then obviously very quickly moved into the galleries and selling your work and just becoming known. And what's wonderful now is that you're also sharing that through teaching.
Oh, and I'm loving it. Loving
And
every second.
So where are you teaching?
I'm teaching at Sierra College, and I teach basic welding classes, and it's really amazing when you see the students start to understand what you're teaching them, and you see a light go on, and they just it's an incredible experience.
Now in this basic welding class, do you get students that are primarily wanting to go into the more functional type of work, or are they also in the creative and wanting to go into the art?
Most of them are not in the creative field, and they don't even consider themselves to be creative people, but they're there basically to learn how to weld so that they can go on and be welders.
Well, the technique, I think, would be something that would take quite a bit of time.
It does, and practice,
And practice.
and a lot of patience, because it takes a lot of practice learning how to get your own technique down, your body movements, and
Well, in that, and you're working with different types of metals.
yes,
You're trying to do different shapings with them. So, yes, I would think that there's just so many different levels of techniques, and you draw upon them in a different way, and depending on what that piece requires.
definitely,
And that's where the experience comes in.
yes.
Well, you know, one of the things that we were talking about is the element that, because I said it would terrify me, there is a significant safety element to this.
Yes, there's equipment that you have to wear, safety equipment. personal devices like my helmet here.
And I love this. So this is the helmet that you always wear this when you're doing the welding.
Yes.
And so it's actually, so your eyes are not, because that's pretty bright that you're working with.
The rays that come off of a welder are, the UV rays are 10 times that of the sun.
Oh, wow.
And they can damage your eyes within moments. So this helmet goes completely dark when I strike up a flame, and it protects my eyes.
So when you're looking through it then, if is all you're seeing then is the flame and then the metal that you're actually working on?
Yes, it's all very dark.
So this would be something you'd have to get used to as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would drive me crazy. I'm having enough trouble with the flecks that are moving around my eyes. It's like, that's a very restrictive environment.
It is, but you get used to it.
So now the other is that you've brought the gloves that you wear.
Yes, it's very important to protect your hands and your arms. I have leather gloves, and I also wear a leather jacket that protects my arms and also
What we have
all the way
here.
down the front of me.
Yes.
Yeah,
And you were saying
it's
that
heavy.
sometimes, yes, it is very heavy. Now I'm envisioning you of being weighted down with all of this equipment that you put on.
It's a little cumbersome, but I know that I'm not going to cut myself. I'm not going to burn myself. The sparks won't nest in certain areas and catch me on fire, usually. Not always.
Well, that's what surprised me when I was talking to you about this, because yes, I guess sparks, I do see sparks flying off when you're doing welding.
Yes.
But you were talking about how they come up and they will actually hit your arms.
Yes.
And it's just not something that you kind of envision is going on in this process.
No, maybe not. But you're creating flame and fire, and when you're working with metals, sometimes there's different chemical components in the metal, and that changes things too. So sparks fly every time you weld.
Wow, I'm admiring you even more because of what first off is this
Thank you.
entire outfit that you have to put on in order to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
The weight of it and just the bulk of what you're working with as well is just absolutely amazing. So do you do weightlifting as well here to keep these arms strong?
Every time I bend metal.
Probably
Every
so.
time I move a piece.
Yeah. So you've also brought some of the things that you do use, and one of them is the hammer.
Yes.
I would say that was probably a pretty significant part of the work that you do.
It is. When I'm bending metal, I usually bend everything cold. I've been doing it long enough that I'm strong enough that I don't have to heat it up. But this is one of my favorite tools. When I start tacking a piece together, I can use a hammer to bend it and bend it in the correct position that I really need it to be in.
Now I know we're going to talk about each one of these pieces, but like on this particular one, the mermaid, you have some pieces that are actually curved as you go around.
Yes.
Now, do you do any type of getting that curve before you bring it to the piece?
I do. My pieces are all different sizes. They range from, a foot tall to 16 feet. And on the bigger pieces, I have to pre-bend everything. The metal's very hard and it's tough to bend, so I use a lot of leverage. I can put part of it in a vise and lean on it and bend it, or I can use my hammer. But I do pre-bend things. When I look at a piece in my mind, it's kind of like looking at a jigsaw puzzle. The box that you look at when you're creating the puzzle is in my head, and everything I grab, all the pieces of metal, is just those little pieces, and I see where they fit, and I know how to bend them. So I can pre-bend a whole bunch of pieces knowing exactly what I'm doing in my head and have them fit as soon as I put them on the piece.
And I find that just absolutely remarkable. My husband and I were actually talking about this last night, and I was just telling him, I don't know how she does this, because you have this vision, and because of your experience, you really don't have to be drawing them out all of the time.
No, I used to.
And somehow you are able to figure out the balance, and like you're saying, you pre-make some of these, and I just find this absolutely amazing.
Thank you.
What a great translation from what here, and again, getting it with your hands.
It seems easy for me because I've been doing it for a while, but for some artists, that's a really big challenge.
I could see that,
Yeah.
because the other question I did ask you, and I'll ask you here, is that all of your work is on these pretty heavy-duty stands.
Yes.
And I was actually anticipating that the stands go on last, but you told me that they go on first. And so that means that you already have a sense of balance that's
Yes.
going to go in that particular piece.
Yes, and when I'm creating a piece, I do a structural framework underneath, and that tells me exactly what the balance point is while I'm creating it, because that metal is always the same thickness, and so everything balances while I'm creating it.
Now, I did take a picture of another mermaid that you're working at
Yes.
your studio, and I am going to show it, and hopefully the photograph will show up in the when we actually edit this. And it shows this process, and you can see the framework, and then you're coming
Yes.
in now with the metal that is being bent.
Yes, if you look down in the tail section and even on the side, you can actually see the metal framework that I used to create the piece to begin with. And that's a structural component. When I'm doing pieces that are 16 feet tall, I have to know that the balance is perfect, so that if somebody climbs on it when it's installed, or or there's heavy weather, that it's not going to go anywhere.
And that's another safety component
It
to
is.
this, because we're not only talking about your safety in the creation, but
Yeah.
ultimately that the piece is safe.
Yes,
Because
definitely.
I imagine these things weigh quite a bit.
They do. They do. I just finished a piece that was 16 feet tall for a land developer in Alameda, and one of those pieces was about 2,500 pounds.
And so when you have that size of a piece at your studio, how do you move around it then? Do you have a ladder you're climbing up on? Scaffolding? What do you do to be able to
Well,
work with something that
For the
big?
really large pieces, I try to do them in 2 or 3 sections, and then I fit them together when they're all finished. If I do them in smaller sections, then I can easily flip them over and move them around so I can finish that piece. Once I put it together, I need a tractor or a crane or 6 or 7 guys. They get heavy quick.
I was going to say, I didn't see any of these big, massive cranes at your place.
No, I lift a lot of things by myself.
Wow. Again, weightlifting
Weightlifting,
in artwork.
structural training.
So when they came and picked up this piece that you did that weighed, what, 2,500 pounds? I assume that was a big truck, and they had the
Yes.
cranes, and on it went in the back.
I actually delivered the pieces, and
okay.
I have a friend that has a big trailer and a neighbor that has a big tractor, and we all came together at the same time and put it on the trailer, and I had a crane meet us down in Alameda to pick up the pieces and put them in place.
And so you were actually there, and you put them in place, and you
Yes.
oversee the whole setup that they have. Now, with that particular piece, did you go and take a look at where it was going to go beforehand?
I did. It was a long process. It took the whole process from conception to finish was about 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's a lot of patience and
It
focus
is.
and dedication.
yeah.
Now, you also, I know you do functional items, and one of the things pieces you have in your yard is a bed frame.
Yes.
And now when you're going to, if someone has you do a piece for like a bed frame, do you go and take a look at what the environment's going to be that this piece is going to go into?
I do. I think that's really important. I like to see where it's going, also how they feel about that space, really, because you want that piece to fit them. You want them to love it. You want them to feel good, when they're near it. And so I recently went to a client's house and looked at their environment, and we talked about how they felt about that space, how it was light and airy, and they could look out the windows and they felt like they were in a tree house, and they could see the birds and the clouds, and so I developed that piece around how they felt about their space.
Well, and so you kind of get to take not only your vision but theirs as well,
Yeah.
and create this fabulous piece. That would be really exciting.
It's fun.
Now, let's, because we have the things here to talk about, and actually I do have another piece of equipment. As I'm sitting here looking at this thing, I should know what this is. My father would be ashamed of me for not being able to name this. Looks like a vise.
It does look like a vise. I use it for leverage. It's actually called a monkey wrench or a pipe
okay.
wrench.
Yes.
This is a very old tool. This was
I like
one
it.
that my grandfather had, or my great-grandfather would have had. I use it to provide leverage when I'm bending pieces.
So let's go on, and we're going to talk about some of the pieces, and we do have some of the cuttings and because you do recycling of work pieces that are cut off of other work, and then you incorporate it in a future one. And
Yes.
so when we talk about them, we can show some of those.
Yes, I use everything.
And as well as you go in and you find things out in the environment and bring them in and incorporate them in.
I do.
I think that's absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
So one of the categories we talked about are the found objects. And we do have an example of found objects, and this is in your sheet.
Yes.
And I know that this is really hard to see, so we're going to try to put this up so we can get a little bit better sense of all of the work that is done on this piece. So walk me through this process and the various pieces that you brought to incorporate
Sure.
into this.
The structural components and the legs are irrigation pipes from a ranch in the Auburn area, and they replace them, probably every 20 years or so, and that's what those are. The rest is basically chain. Some are chains from cars, some are tractors. There's a swing set chain in there. There is just a variety. Basically whatever I see that fits my idea of the perfect piece.
So one of the things I also love is how you did the ears. And so tell me a little bit about how you did this, because there's actually a curl that you've achieved here.
Yes. The material came from a side of a barn, probably someplace that had a hole in the barn, or they used a space to put wood up against it. I take the metal and usually use pliers or my monkey wrench and put it in a vise and bend it that way.
And again, it's not heated when you're going through this process.
No, I used to heat everything because it's so much easier to bend that way. But when I'm creating the piece, then I'm dealing with hot metal. And so I kind of taught myself not to use heat so that I could do it quicker. It's more instantaneous, where I could take a piece and bend it and then put it right on.
Yeah. And then the same with the nose. I love the way that you've pinched it in, so you actually get that face coming down into the nose.
Yeah, I like pieces to have some personality, and that's part of it. Finding the right material and then bending it certain ways.
Well, I love the way that you're able to find these things in the environment and then come and bring them into this, repurpose them into something so absolutely incredible.
Thank you.
Now, we also, then, we're going to go to the light and airy and things you can see through, which
Sure.
I love that particular description. I don't think the hair on our mermaid is in that kind of a style.
Yes.
But I also did I took another picture of one of your pieces that you have out in front of your house. And this one is a horse.
Yes.
And let's start with, because you do a lot of horses.
Yes. So most of my pieces, when they're light and airy, I am using a material that you can see through and create the piece so that there are negative and positive lines, and then it comes together and just creates something very smooth. I do love working on horses, and there's a found object in this. They have casters on the bottom that were used to open barn doors.
And so when you're doing this, so this is actually with a wire that you're using and twisting it around and creating this kind of almost a skeleton of this horse.
Yes.
So there is no support pieces within it.
No, the piece in itself becomes structural when you have a round circle that provides enough strength. But I did actually start with a structural form on the inside of that, and then I cut it out.
Well, I love that. And you have a very large horse on your property.
I do. It's almost 15 feet tall.
Yes.
It's a work in progress. It's only half done. So one side it looks pretty good, and the other side it looks pretty empty.
Now, because it has solid parts to it, but it also has this open and can see through it as well. So even though we've kind of divided it in these categories, there's a lot of combinations
Yes.
that you in it
That piece has a lot of found objects in it. So
as well.
I have a neighbor down the street that works on lawnmowers, and he brings me parts and pieces all the time, and a lot of agricultural pieces.
So
with some
that was
history.
so. Let's talk about how you get all of these pieces. As you say, people bring you things.
Yes.
Are you constantly on the lookout for, oh, wow, that looks really good?
Yes, I'm constantly on the lookout. I am also the artist in residence at Recology Auburn Placer, which is a waste center, and they separate everything. So the metal is in one pile, and I can go through that metal pile anytime I need supplies.
Oh, I didn't even know they do that.
Oh, they're amazing.
I think that's a great. That makes me feel better about when I'm throwing things away.
They really try to recycle. They want to be able to recycle
Yes.
100% of items, and I think they're at like 75% now. So they're very good to me. let me take whatever I can use.
And then, like I had said before, is then you obviously have pieces from other work that you're able to, you keep that,
Yes.
and then you bring it forward into another piece.
Yes.
There's nothing wasted at your home.
No, there's nothing wasted. So like these pieces here, I cut flames out of a solid piece of metal, and then when I have a piece left over, I throw it underneath my table, and when I'm working on something new, I usually take that piece of metal and put it into a new piece.
Well, and I also notice on this particular one, there's a lot of aging that's going on here.
There is.
And when I go to your place, you have so many of your pieces that are out in the weather.
Mm-hmm.
And your pieces are meant to, or they can be inside, but they can also be outside.
Yes.
And so that's very significant in what you're doing as well.
Yeah, there are some pieces that are better left in the house or in a shop or wherever you want to put them, covered patio. This piece in particular with the colored steel, that color will eventually exfoliate because pieces rust, and that's a constant change. And so that's a piece that's better off inside.
Inside.
Yeah, but the other ones I try to really concentrate on doing things that can be left outside.
Since we've referenced back to this beautiful piece several times, so let's go ahead and focus on this one. Let's start with the air. The hair is what we call the light and airy. So
Yes.
talk to me and tell me about how you go about, because I love the curls and everything that you've captured.
I use a bunch of different techniques to do the hair. Sometimes it's just needle nose pliers, and I sit down and play with the wire or whatever I'm using. Other times I try to use a template to give myself easier access to having the right curl or being able to pull it apart.
I think it shows a real understanding of curly hair.
It does. It does. Well, I kind of live with that, so.
So yes, and I love this too, because it's as if the wind is blowing on her and her hair is going. Then I notice in the body of the work, it's this. I do see this consistently in some of your other pieces.
Yes.
So how did you go about with these? It appears like strips almost, that then
It
you bring
is.
them together.
Yeah, it is. I love pieces that have a lot of texture. So I try to create texture. And, you know, when you're drawing on a piece of paper, you can do hash marks or lines one direction or color something in, and it provides a different texture. It's the same thing with the steel. I love pieces like the lamb has the textural component with the chain. This piece also has that with putting lines next to each other, just pieces of steel, and then doing some grinding contour work.
And so these are small strips that you've actually welded together.
Yes.
And as opposed to a big piece that you've cut holes in.
Yes.
Okay. So so how intricate that is, and then shaping it so you get this nice figure that she has. And then you have a chain that comes around her neck.
Yes.
And that is usually comes from that's already an existing chain, but again
Yeah.
something that you found
Yeah.
and incorporated in.
I think that piece actually came from the back of a toilet or something, you know, that used to lift the
Yes.
the seal.
And let's go into the bodywork, because I think this is absolutely beautiful bodywork. And
Thank you.
again, because of the coloring that you have on the metal. So you use both metal that has the color as well as it's not
Yes.
shiny, as opposed to dull.
Right.
Stuff that's already been rusted. And so how do you decide which of those you're going to choose for a piece?
Oh my goodness, it's something that's already in my head, and I want something a certain way. I'm not sure that it's really something I have to think about and concentrate on. With this piece, there are parts and components from a Makita toolbox, a 55-gallon drum, Coleman stove, and I have a lot of colored work at home that I use and I cut up, but it's also a safety issue because it's very toxic when you weld it. The fumes that come off are poisonous.
When they have the color on them. Wow, so we
Yeah.
didn't talk about that element.
No.
So we're talking about not only flames, sparks, but you also have fumes.
Yes, yes, and there's, you know, when you're grinding metal, there's components of metal that fly through the
Metal as
air.
well?
So
Wow, so do you ever wear some type of a mask?
I do. I have another welding helmet that actually has a positive air source. So it has a tube that comes off at the top that blows air through my mask so that I can't have any flames or smoke that comes up into it, so I'm not breathing it.
So it's a helmet just like this one, and we're talking about that has these tubes that come down.
Yes.
And what is it connecting to?
There's an air source, a fan system that hooks onto the back of my belt.
And
I
so
kind of look like I'm on Mars.
So you do cover something that comes around and hooks around you then?
Yes. Yes.
And so we're adding just another element of weight to you
Yes.
as well.
Yes. It's a little cumbersome. It actually pulls on my head in certain directions, and it makes me very unhappy, but I love what I'm doing.
I was going to say, you must have such a passion for what you do.
I do. I can't live without it. I really can't. I'm not a nice person if I can't go out and work in my shop.
Well, I appreciate the sacrifices that you do to
Thank
bring
you.
us these pieces. Because,
Thank you.
wow, and I hope that when people listen to this, they will also realize, oh my goodness, this
There's
is
a
what
lot to
goes.
it.
And I know you're going to be embarrassed that I'm going to bring this up.
Uh-oh.
But I know that you have a bruise on your lip, and this is because...
Well, my lovely 3-pound hammer, when I was working on the mermaid that's in progress,
Yes.
I was using full force to hit the piece, and it ricocheted and bounced back up into my face. So, it's just one of those exciting things. You have to duck and weave and,
Another hazard.
try to hide from what you're doing. I was just, I probably could have been safer, but I was so excited about what I was doing that I wasn't thinking about the fact that the hammer could come back and hit me in the face.
I think that I could see that easily happening.
It does.
You get into what you're doing.
Yes.
And there might be a little voice in the back of your head going, maybe you shouldn't be doing
careful.
this. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, I've had a couple pretty good things that not good things that have happened in my shop, but I'm still walking and
and here and again creating and bringing us incredible work.
Thank you. I love it.
It
Love to do
shows
it.
in your work,
Thank you.
definitely. Now you have a piece that I'm trying to decide whether or not we're going to talk about this piece and the photo up, because we also have two others. So I am going to talk about these two pieces because they are here. Yeah. And first off, let's introduce this young lady here.
This is Ms. Fiona Flauntet, and she is a burlesque dancer trying to get your attention.
And I think that she does that very well.
Thank you.
And I particularly love the skirt that you have on her. So what is that from?
The skirt is actually from an old house that was torn down. They had brass screens in their windows, and this is part of the brass screening.
Well, so then the coloring of it, that was just the color that you it came, or did you color it in any way?
Well, no, brass tarnishes.
Oh, okay.
Really
I
easy.
thought it went green.
No, copper turns green.
Copper.
And this does have copper in the strings in the back of the corset, but the copper is coated, so it won't ever change color.
Mm-hmm. And I love, again, the work that you have here and going clear down into her heels. And
a woman has to have a good set of heels.
Oh, well, this one definitely does. And the balance that you've achieved. She's up here on one leg, and the way that you have her body over and you've achieved that balance, again, is that somehow I would be there with my measuring, and I would be, okay, it has to be here and a certain degree of this. And
sure. Part of that balance is the weight of the piece on the base, because the piece goes out further in front of her so that there is more of a balance point. But the piece is heavy enough that she's not going to go anywhere.
I love her little hat, and again, the hair. Beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Now, the other piece that you have here is the one that I've not seen this piece, so tell me about this one.
This is a piece that I completed after I came back from a European tour. I went to Olympus and saw all these huge structural buildings that were made out of cement or whatever they used to do the Corinthian pillars. And I had found these detail pieces. They came out of a building, I think, in San Francisco that was torn down or revamped. And these were the part of the Corinthian pillars that held up the building. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of about walking in the midst of greatness. Mm-hmm. And for me, that came from my travels.
Well, I love, again, the way that you've reclaimed and brought this and have and have that meaning in the picture.
Thank you. Thank you. Every
Sculpture.
one of my pieces has some kind of a meaning, and it's kind of like a timeline of my life. I can look back at pieces and see where I was, what I was thinking. You know, they all come from my heart.
Well, and that's certainly apparent in everything that you do.
Thank you.
And now we are going to get to my absolute favorite piece, which I hope, as I've told you, I hope it never ever finds a buyer, because I love this piece and I love going by your place all the time and
Thank
seeing
you.
it there. And this one this is the full picture of it. And what is the name of this piece?
This is Scandalous Celia and her scintillating swing.
And she is actually hanging from a tree
Yes.
on this swing, and which is I've always just absolutely loved. And now this would be representative of the solid.
Yes.
And so when I was taking the pictures of it, because I love the detail that you bring to the work, and again we're coming back into what her hair forms into her, and the curl that you get. But the part I love is when we get down here and her garters.
Yes.
So what did you use to actually have her garters?
These were little pulleys that came from a photography studio where they had a line up on the wall that they could clip their photos on. And this was the pulley system that moved their photos back and forth.
So anything that's metal is just fair game for you.
It is. I love it.
And I love too, now the piece that you showed that you had the cutting, that is definitely showing up in this too, because
Yes.
you have the work around whatever she's wearing here. You can see that. And you've brought that in, and this is all through welding then that is put together?
Yes, it's put together with welding, but these detail pieces, I use a plasma cutter, and a plasma cutter uses electricity and compressed air. And once the electricity creates a ground through the metalwork, you use air to blow that hot metal out. And so it's kind of like cutting butter with a hot knife. You can draw really intricately on steel or any other metal, really, and create something that's very detailed.
Well, I strongly encourage anyone to go and take a look at your place and actually be looking at this incredible piece and
Thank you.
have you talk about it, because the pictures just don't do it justice. This is another one that I love, and this is
The kiss.
and this is a bust, and again, the work on the hair is different than what we're seeing here. So explain the process that we have in this hair and how it's just integrated so beautifully into her face.
She has about 300 pieces of hair, and it's actually the same process as one of these other pieces. I still use either a template or something to bend the metal with, but her hair is the thickness of some of the structural steel that I use, so it's a little harder to bend. It's a tougher process.
So 300 pieces.
Yes.
And when you're attaching this, it's like attaching a single hair
At a time.
to her scalp.
Yes.
So did you start from the bottom up, or the?
I had to.
Okay.
I had
Now
to,
that would make
because
sense.
once you get a couple pieces on the top, you can't actually get back down to the bottom.
Yes.
But I started at the bottom, just like, if somebody was cutting your hair, they pull everything aside.
Yes.
But I started at the very bottom, doing the very front and then the very back, and then kept adding pieces to it.
Now, in her features that you have, is that through a hammering process, or how did you get such delicate features on her?
This definitely was more of that jigsaw puzzle process.
Okay.
I had to cut pieces a certain direction. When you take one piece of steel, like this scrap that you were showing earlier, one piece of steel can do a concave shape or a convex shape, but it can't do both. So the pieces have to be smaller, and then you weld them together and form them, create, a different shape. And then you grab another piece of metal and put that in as well. So there were probably 500 or 600 pieces of metal just in her face.
Just in her face. And so, but it is so smooth. So what do you do then to get this? It looks like one piece.
Yeah, well, thank you.
It really does. So
this was technically challenging for me. I had to weld it all together and then grind it off and then weld it together and grind it and weld it and grind it. And it was a long process. I learned a lot of new words that typically don't come out of my mouth when I was creating this piece.
In different languages.
Yes, yes, definitely.
So one of the things when we were looking at this, and because they are out in the weather, and so they are actually constantly changing.
Yes, yes. Rust changes every day. It exfoliates, it brings in different colors. I mean, rust can go from gold to blue to purple and all the way through. You can actually buy rust in powder form, and a lot of potters use it because they add it to their clay. But I use it so that I can create different colors on different pieces.
Now, I was surprised that when I took this picture and actually was developing it, or when it was coming up, I didn't notice, but there's blue actually showing up in this photo.
Yes, yes. I used heat to treat this one first, and I wanted the whole thing a consistent color. So it took quite some time to heat each piece of metal because they're all different thicknesses. And so, with all the layers,
yes.
They're all different thicknesses. So it takes a little bit of time, but I tried to get everything to like a cobalt color on this piece.
Well, one of the things that I also loved when we were talking about the aging process, and when I looked at her, and you can see the various, where the rust has actually come down and stuff. And what I felt from her is that she's depicting our lives as well.
Yes.
Where we're
constantly
changing.
Yep.
And we go through this aging process as well.
Yes, definitely.
So I do like her for that purpose.
Thank you.
So it's another beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Now, we talked a little bit about that sometimes you use metal that is already rusted.
Yes.
And there was one piece on your property that I looked at it and I thought, oh, this must have been here for a long time. But surprise, surprise, you told me, no, this is a new piece.
New piece, yes.
And that is actually, it's a very whimsical bear.
Yes.
And so this, again, is a process of using something like this.
Similar, yes. Yes.
And then so you bring it together. And why did you choose to use this, a rusted metal on this particular piece?
Well, I only wanted some of it to look that way.
Okay.
I wanted the bear to look a little bit different than the car. The car that I created is from a toolbox, which had pre-existing color on it. And there is also part of a tail light from a car from the 30s or the 40s. And that had a different color. And so I really wanted to pull it all together. And there are other pieces in here that are shiny. So when I create the piece, I think about the colors and not only the composition, but the composition of where it's shiny, like as if the light was hitting something, or having it darker or rusted in certain areas. Now
the wheels too, where did you get those?
They're from a cart or a wagon.
I was going to say they look like the wagon wheels.
Yeah, probably a turn of the century.
And then so we have the umbrella too, which I guess is your light and airy type of work on this.
Yes, it's all mixed in.
Well,
and found objects.
And found objects. So we have just a little bit of everything in here. Yeah. The other that we have on this particular is
delicate balance.
Delicate balance.
Yes.
And this is using, again, what we're seeing in the body of the mermaid back here.
Yes.
And I think, was there another? Maybe it's just...
No, the mermaid I'm working on.
That was it. You've seen it again. Again, it just is fascinating that we're talking about very small pieces that you're actually bringing in to do this shaping. And that you actually achieve this curve as you're coming around here.
Yeah, I create the curve before I weld the piece on, typically, for something like this, because you know what the female form is or the male form is, and you want those curves to be there. And so I bend the pieces and put them on.
And again, another one that you can see. I tell you, your front yard is an art gallery.
Thank you.
Now, one of the other things you were telling me about is that something that people come to your, particularly the studio tours, and you try to make sure that you do this every year.
Yes.
So for those who do collections, you do birdhouses. I
do. I love... my grandmother used to have 10 boxes all through her kitchen when I was a little girl. And I've always loved them. Some of them are ornate, they're beautiful, well painted. Some are very old. Well, when I've had family pass away and ended up with several tin boxes, they don't fit in my kitchen. So I started creating something with them. And the birdhouses is what I came up with. And these are pieces that I typically only do for studio tours, so that there's a different price point for everything, so everybody can afford to take a piece home. And then I use a lot of found objects in the details of the piece.
Well, when we show the kind of an enlargement of this, there are 3 different birdhouses that are depicted here, and I am actually, because I'm in the studio tour as well, I don't get this opportunity to see
come
this,
out.
but I love that you have all of these trees with these low hanging branches, and that you've hung these from these trees, and because it just shows them so well.
Yeah, and it has to be like it would be at home.
Well, definitely, and I could see where people would start, going, okay, I'm going to be collecting these.
Yeah.
So, just out of curiosity, because do you just start doing these like fall and to create these for it's the November tour that you do these for?
I do these for the November tour and also our North Auburn studio art tour for Mother's Day weekend. And those are the only time I create them, really.
Since you mentioned that, we might as well go ahead and talk a little bit about the tour. The tour is coming up May 12th and 13th.
Yes.
And you are one of 20 artists?
20. Yes.
And who all's involved in this?
We have artists from all over North Auburn, and then we also have some guests from other areas that come into somebody else's studio.
But they actually stay in the North Auburn area.
Yes, yes. And so all the artists are pretty close together, so you can take a tour in 1 day or 2 days and be able to see all the artists and talk about what their pieces are or why they create them, and hopefully see them work as well.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you're in the tour. That
Thank
is
you.
certainly going to give people
You too.
Thank you. The opportunity to come by your place. Do you do any demonstrating when you're on the tour?
I do. I love to work when I'm there. Sometimes I have too many people to talk to, and it's hard to get to the studio. But I've had people say, "Hey, will you show us what you do?" And I'll go down there and show them. And, invite them in and put my heavy equipment on all the kids and let them experience the chaos of just the weight of the equipment.
I think a kid would collapse just with the jacket. So.
It always makes for good photo opportunities.
Yes.
When they have the hood on and my gloves and my jacket usually goes to the floor.
Well, what a great opportunity. So we're running out of time.
Okay, great.
So if you could tell our audience how they can get in contact with you.
Definitely.
Where you're located, particularly since the tour is coming up. That
Yes.
would be great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. So my studio is on Bell Road. I'm at 5185 Bell in Auburn. I'm about 4 miles out from town. And if you'd like to be in contact with me, you can try my website, and that's www.jjohnsonstudio.com. And there's also a contact place that you can email me from that site.
And I also will add is that you can also see more of Jennifer's work on the North Auburn Artist site. They have a Facebook site as well as a web page, and that provides kind of a background of Jennifer and shows some really nice pictures of her work.
Thank you.
And so certainly encourage you to go and look there.
Yeah, we have a website on the Facebook pages too.
Yes.
So
thank you very much for coming by. This has
you.
been very enjoyable.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for tuning in to Meet the Artist on Auburn Community Television. It is always a pleasure to introduce artists in our local community to you. I certainly get a lot out of each one of the interviews and have been enjoying this opportunity to present this show to you. I hope that as we're going through this process that maybe you're discovering that there's an artist within you, or maybe you have one that lives just around the corner.